The genre or category of literature we will concentrate on in this module of our class is drama. So I suppose you may be expecting a dramatic introduction to it, perhaps complete with costume, spectacle, and song. But after rereading my script for this mini lesson, I have to conclude that it's an admittedly undramatic introduction. Still, this should communicate the basics we'll need to get started. Then, our understandings will deepen as we read and respond to the materials in the module. Speaking of the materials, you'll once again notice themes related to science fiction in both Lawler's AstroTurf and Kopek's RUR. Those themes should hopefully help you to make interesting connections between the plays in this module and the poems and the fictions in our other modules. So, in terms of the basics of drama, let's start with a couple definitions. First, let's define drama as any type of story that is meant to be acted out, such as a play that will be acted out in front of an audience in a theater, or a screenplay that will be acted out in front of a camera. Because of that, there's a crucial difference to recall between drama and the other genres of literature we're exploring this semester, poetry and fiction. Both those genres of literature are intended for an audience of readers. However, drama is intended for an audience of artistic collaborators, primarily the performers, who will essentially read it to an audience of viewers and listeners. Remember, the goal of a playwright or a screenwriter is for an audience to see and hear a performance on a stage or a screen of what is written in their script. Speaking of those other genres, I should note that the dialogue in dramas can technically be written in the form of either verse, poetry, or prose, fiction. For example, William Shakespeare most often composed his plays, such as The Tempest, in blank verse, which is an unrhymed form of iambic pentameter. However, most modern playwrights, such as Carol Kopek and RUR, tend to instead write in prose. Now, when dramatists, whether playwrights or screenwriters, compose their stories, they're almost exclusively making scenes as opposed to writing summaries. So, that brings us to our second definition. What is a scene? For the sake of this class, let's define a scene as a unit of drama that happens in one place at one time. If we want to be fancy, we can express that same concept by saying that a scene has a unity of time and place. And how do dramatists make a scene? Well, they first establish a setting. That's the time and the place we were just talking about. Then they populate that setting with characters. Those are the people in the story, and the robots in the specific case of RUR. Then the dramatists make those characters take visible actions and exchange verbal dialogue. Those actions are simply the things the characters do, and that dialogue is simply the things the characters say. Finally, to make their scenes more interesting, dramatists attempt to create a combination of actions and dialogue that generate suspense, that type of anxiety we feel when we don't know what's going to happen next. Perceptive people that you are, you might notice the balances between verbal dialogue and visible action tend to be different in plays and screenplays. That's because a play is meant to be acted out in front of an audience. That is, the audience will watch it live on a stage. Because of that, fewer scene changes are possible than in a screenplay. That tends to translate to fewer, longer scenes. Because of that, in plays, there tends to be more emphasis on verbal dialogue. A screenplay, on the other hand, is meant to be acted out in front of a camera. That is, the audience will watch it recorded on a screen. Because of that, more scene changes are possible than in a play. That translates to more shorter scenes. Because of that, in screenplays, there tends to be more emphasis on visible actions. So, if you've watched more movies than plays, you might think of Lawler's AstroTurf and Kopek's RUR as a little dialogue heavy. However, that's simply a product of the practical considerations of performing a drama on stage. Finally, a bit about dramatic structure. It is not uncommon for modules about reading drama as literature, whether plays or screenplays, to start out with discussions of the lessons we can learn from important theorists such as Aristotle or Gustav Freytag. With that in mind, two of our readings for this module will be excerpts from Aristotle's Poetics, which we'll call 6 parts of a drama and 3 parts of a plot, and an excerpt from Freytag's Technique of the Drama, which we'll call 5 parts and 3 crises. As you'll read in our excerpt from Aristotle, his analysis of ancient tragedies such as Sophocles' Oedipus the King led him to believe that dramas are composed of 6 parts: plot, character, diction, thought, spectacle, and song. In his judgment, the most important of those 6 parts of a drama is the plot, the term he used to describe the structure of the incidents. And he divided that plot, in turn, into 3 parts that he simply called a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's why discussions about the plots of plays or screenplays are often framed in terms of 3-act structure. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 are respectively fancier terms for Aristotle's beginning, middle, and end. So you'll notice I've divided my one diagram into 3 parts. I've labeled those 3 parts with both Aristotle's ancient terms, beginning, middle, and end, as well as our more modern terms, Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. As you'll read in our excerpt from Freytag, his analysis of more modern plays, such as Shakespeare's Hamlet, led him to believe that dramas are composed of 5 parts that he arranged in a pyramidal structure. You'll often see teachers of literature or creative writing sketch out this profoundly influential pyramid from Freytag, even if they don't often mention his name. The terms that Freytag used to describe these 5 parts of dramas were introduction, rising action, climax, falling action, and catastrophe. He called the last part catastrophe because he was analyzing a lot of tragedies, which do end catastrophically for their main characters. Nowadays, we tend to label this 5th part of a drama as the resolution instead. And we often label the first part as the exposition instead. Well, I've put Freytag's terms, introduction and catastrophe on my diagram, because after all, I am a teacher of literature and creative writing. I have also written out our more modern terms, exposition and resolution, above them. I've also added the term action, which is meant to encompass Freytag's rising action, climax, and falling action. The exposition section of a story tends to be where writers introduce their setting and characters. The action section is where, you guessed it, we tend to see most of the action, which tends to first rise toward the climax and then fall away from it. The climax for Freytag was the most important part of the structure, often where the main character takes an action that changes the direction of not only the story, but also their life. And the resolution section tends to be where the writer communicates, whether explicitly or implicitly, the outcome of the story for the main character. So, this has been our admittedly undramatic introduction to drama. However, if any of your family or friends ask you, what are you doing this week for your class? You can at least give them the exceptionally collegiate answer, oh, we're reading Aristotle and Freytag.